Hello everyone and welcome to the Tavern. It's the penultimate episode of X-Men 97. And I'll say it right here, I called it! I've said multiple times in the past that this season was going to incorporate fatal attractions, and yes, this episode heavily incorporates fatal attractions. The only major issue with it is that we rushed to the most famous parts of fatal attractions without any of the major build up to it. But again, that's been an issue with a lot of the adaptations of stories within X-Men 97. As you can tell, I'm fairly excited. This was a very good episode. In fact, this is one of the better episodes of the series, not only because it gets a few iconic scenes correct, but the action is some of the best in the entire, not just this season, but I would say the entirety of the X-Men 92 series. While I am excited about having made this accurate prediction, I'm still worried about how this series is going to end. While I do know how Fatal Attractions ends, we still have a lot of the Bastion stuff that really feels like it's being glossed over, and these two events don't really mesh well, which means the ending could be a complete mess of ideas. So we'll have to see how that goes in the final episode. While I know that referencing Fatal Attractions is going to be a bit of a spoiler in and of itself, if you don't know what happens in that event, then you have no spoilers for this episode, and I will do my best to keep all the spoilers to a minimum. We open with some nice visual storytelling as Storm returns to the team, as we see the effects of Magneto shutting off the world's power, things like that. It's really well done. It shows that there was a lot of effort put into this episode to really convey the heavier emotions that are going on between the characters and the danger that the world is currently facing. For a very brief period of time, we get the entire team together, but obviously there's tension around Xavier having left the X-Men for so long, having given the Xavier Institute to Magneto, and all the problems that has caused. Magneto shows up in order to offer the X-Men the chance to join him, and this adds to the division we see within the team. This also pushes the X-Men to put together a plan to take down Bastion and take down Magneto, which has them divide into the gold team and the blue team, which I do appreciate because that is a really cool little reference there to the mid-90s versions of the comics. It is great to see little things like that, even if the gold team and the blue team are not exactly the teams they were in the comics, but that's more due to the fact that we don't have enough X-Men characters to really build these teams the way they were in that era. After that, the rest of the episode is action with a few bits of dialogue here and there. On the Bastion side of things, we see that side of the X-Men team battling against the various Sentinels. We get a confrontation between Jean Grey and Mr. Sinister, and we get to see Cable kick some ass. It's a little bit inconclusive, but pushes towards the Bastion Sentinel side of things winning. Meanwhile, on Asteroid M, we see the other side of the X-Men team battling against Magneto and the X-Men who sided with him. The big problem with this fight, in my opinion, is we could have used more of the Brotherhood characters being teamed up with Magneto. When it's Magneto and two other former X-Men versus a team of X-Men and Charles Xavier, it just feels unbalanced and not really well thought out. It would have been nice to have seen a few other Brotherhood members team up with Magneto prior to this fight, just to make things more exciting and to show off more characters, more powers, etc. The Magneto side of things ends on a very dark cliffhanger, and for those who know Fatal Attractions, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Themes aren't particularly strong this episode, primarily because of how this is a action-heavy episode. Of course, we have the family theme. Storm really pushes the family theme. We get a lot of that discussion of Xavier wanting Jean and Scott to live their own lives. We get a little moment with Nightcrawler and Rogue, and we get that whole point of we're a family, we should be united, we shouldn't be fighting with each other. It's all well and good, but it really takes up like the first 10 minutes of the episode before we get into all the action. The second theme I could probably discuss here is anger. Not only do we have the anger that a lot of the different characters are facing right now at the situation, we have Magneto's anger at the world, we have the X-Men's anger at Xavier, and we have Bastion's anger towards mutants. Most of it gets explored via just fighting and occasionally a little bit of speechifying here and there, but for the most part, it's just kind of a prevailing energy in the episode rather than being a deeper theme. As for characters, there's three I kind of want to get into. First, of course, is Magneto, who is now back to his villain status. He gives a really good speech about why his side is correct, and he has some great repartee with Xavier. He definitely is showing off the full extent of his powers and how destructive Magneto can truly be when he pushes himself beyond his standard limits. Plus, he has the dark version of his traditional outfit, which I very much appreciate. It's one of my favorite Magneto costumes. Xavier is back, and he is full Xavier. He is very much speechifying, he is very much trying to reason with people, whether it's President Kelly, whether it's Jean and Scott, whether it's Magneto. He's always trying to build that bridge through communication instead of through violence or conquest. In the battle against Magneto, he isn't particularly useful, which is rather unfortunate because he's still a telekinetic. He still could have used that to assist the X-Men in the battle, but using his psychic powers as a weapon is something Xavier rarely does, which is ironic because we're doing Fatal Attractions, but hey, we'll get to that in the next episode. What I'm trying to say when it comes to Xavier is that I like the way he is portrayed in this episode. It feels very in character, but I would have liked to have seen him do a bit more than just talk. Finally, there's Rogue. Rogue has been an interesting character throughout most of the season, as her loyalty to Magneto versus her loyalty to the X-Men keeps going back and forth. And with the death of Gambit, it's kind of pushing her more towards a vengeful, darker route. She even gives a good speech on how few X-Men actually went to Genosha, which was something I commented on, I believe, in that episode when it was just Rogue, Gambit, and Magneto, and why aren't the other X-Men there? She's completely right. If the other X-Men had been there, Gambit probably would have lived, and probably a lot of the people on Genosha could have survived, having those extra X-Men assisting in defending the country. Rogue's anger, Rogue's character growth and changes throughout the season have been really interesting to see, and I really like this episode having a payoff for what Rogue has been going through. The audio in this episode is average for the series. We have some decent action music, but it's the same action themes we've heard over and over again. It's decent, but it's nothing special or super memorable. Even half an hour after watching the episode, I tried to remember the action themes and I just couldn't, other than the ones that are utilizing the main theme in a more action-heavy tempo. That doesn't mean the music is particularly bad, it's just kind of there. The speeches were well done. There's great emotion behind the words, which really shows off the acting of a lot of the voice actors in this show. And frankly, those speeches really do create some very intense moments. The writing is just so good in this episode, which is weird to say when the majority of the episode is people punching each other. Obviously, the visuals are really good this episode. Not only do we get to see Magneto put together Asteroid M, not only do we get that nice visual storytelling moment in the beginning where everyone is looking just devastated and defeated, but we also get some of the best action that X-Men has ever seen in animated format. We get to see all the characters use their powers in fun ways. We get some one-liners, we get some intense moments. Overall, visuals are incredibly good, especially once you get to the confrontation between Xavier and Magneto, with Xavier trying to reason with his friend while Magneto is just sending metal everywhere to attack the X-Men, to attack Xavier. The use of shading and the use of light is really, really well done in those scenes, and I very much appreciate it. You see that shading stuff they were doing with Bastion earlier to really emphasize specific threats of the villains, and here you see it used again, even amongst the X-Men themselves, as they deal with the current situation. The ending does have the brutality that it really needs to emphasize what exactly is going on in the story. While it isn't quite as shocking as it was in the comic book version, I will say that it's still very intense when you realize what's happening. I also noticed that several characters had different costumes now. Wolverine has his brown outfit, which actually was the one I grew up with and kind of prefer over the yellow outfit. Jean Grey had the Marvel Girl look, which was nice, and Cable got his blue outfit, which honestly is my preference over the original Liefeld design. Finally, in terms of children's television standards, there's a few moments of language here and there. Violence of the ending would never have been allowed, but otherwise I think it would have slid by. They've had some intense stuff in X-Men before, and I think overall this would have fit perfectly fine within the paradigm of the 92 series. I am grateful that this episode was good. After the previous one, I was worried that our ending would be moving in a more negative direction. So having this episode have great writing and amazing visuals really did boost my feelings about the series overall. That being said, mixing two events together is a little weird. I really feel like they should have saved Bastion as a side villain and really done justice to Fatal Attractions. I really am worried about the ending, but not for the reasons you might think. I feel that it will have a fairly decent ending, though there are a lot of plot threads to tie up for this conclusion. Where my bigger concern lies is in the fact that the head writer was fired before the premiere of this season. There's been no major story as to why. There's been a lot of speculation, but nothing that seems terrible enough for Marvel to want to get rid of this guy. And it makes me worried about season 2, because the writing was really good in this season, and we don't know how much of season 2 he wrote. We might just get a very terrible season 2. Worse yet, I think I agree with a lot of the people online who are worried that season 2 is going to be hitting stories from the 2000s, the 2010s, or God forbid, the 2020s. But I'm not going to worry about that season until it actually comes around. The one thing I have noticed when it comes to this show is it seems to go into peaks and valleys. We usually get like a good episode into kind of a bad episode, into a good episode, into a bad episode. But for the most part, everything has been average or above average, which I do appreciate. This time around, we are in a peak because my score is 4.5 out of 5. This episode had great writing, great visuals, and great action. It does lose a little bit of points for kind of the weakness in terms of themes, and the audio takes a hit because in certain parts in the fighting, there's so much going on, it just becomes a cacophony of noise rather than a well-orchestrated audio feast. As this series comes to a conclusion, I've been considering reviewing more animated series. So if you have one you'd like me to talk about, whether it's good or bad, let me know in the comments, and I will take it into consideration for future videos. Until the next episode, please like and subscribe, and share this video with all your X-Men buddies. Until next time, I'll see you at the tavern.